Alright, what's up everyone? I'm back! So I just spent like the last month and a half moving into this new house/studio. Anyway, that's why it's taken me so long to make another video. But we're back, and we're going to continue on with our unit on duality. If you're new here and don't really know what's going on, a card will pop up in the top corner. That video is another video that explains what the heck I'm doing here in this video. Anyway, I missed you guys a lot, and it's been a while. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I made a smash meme advertising this video. And unfortunately, that is not the video I'm going to make today. I had planned to finally get into the cool concept of the duality of human nature and how we're both good and evil, but it didn't really make any sense to go from talking about a bunch of concepts to a bunch of different people, and then this video, which I'm going to make, which is about concepts again. So I'm going to try and make this video way shorter than the last one I made. The last one was like 20 minutes long. We're going to try and get this sucker down to like 6 minutes. So we gotta hustle. So this video is not going to deal with the duality of human nature. Instead, it's going to deal with the concept of duality in myths. That's right, you heard me, myths, like Norse myths. We're actually not going to talk about Norse myths, but you know what I mean. Before we get into it today, we have a word of the day. You know how I love word of the day. If you've been in my class, word of the day, sometimes we do 10 of them. And today's word of the day is essential to understanding the rest of what we're going to talk about today. Today's word of the day is archetype. I'm going to give a 2-second definition on what an archetype is, but if you're interested in learning more, because it's a super cool concept, card in the top corner of the screen will tell you more. Go ahead and click on it now. So basically what an archetype is it's a symbol or a concept or an idea or an image or basically a thing. Anything that you can think of, but this thing has to have 2 specific qualities to be an archetype. It must appear in multiple different cultures across multiple different time periods. So the archetypes that we're going to look at today appear in Chinese mythology, Roman mythology, Greek mythology, Native American mythology, Indian mythology, etc., etc., etc. And if it hasn't occurred to you already, the question that should be plaguing your mind is, how the heck can an idea like that occur across multiple different civilizations across a period of time? And that's the super cool thing about archetypes, is that's exactly what they do. And some of them are weirdly specific. Like, for example, the concept of a child born to a virgin. You might think that that's basically a Christian myth. Well, it also appears in Egyptian mythology, Native American mythology, Indian mythology. It appears all over the place. And some of these cross a couple of millennia. So how the heck did they know about these concepts? Well, that's the mystery of an archetype. This dude, Carl Jung, who is the guy who came up with the concept of archetypes, thought that it had to do with some kind of collective unconscious, or that we all shared some kind of deep part of our brain that not only did we not know that we have, but we also didn't know that we shared. It's a cool theory. Anyway, you need to know about archetypes for today's video, and I'll talk about why that is in a minute. One way of thinking about archetypes is that they're kind of like patterns, except that these patterns exist across long distances of space and time. So basically, we're going to look at the concept of duality in a bunch of different cultures over a long period of time. So we're going to start with creation myths, myths about how the world and our species began. But we're not going to do it chronologically because that seems difficult, and I'd rather just do it the way I've written it down. So the first example we're going to look at is actually a poem by a guy called Hesiod. And this poem is over 2,000 years old. It was written in the 7th or 8th century before Christ. And this poem is called Hesiod's Theogony.
Theogony.
Weird name, right? And Hesiod's Theogony actually describes the origins of the Greek gods themselves. So where did Zeus, for example, or the Titans who he fights against even come from? Check out this line from his poem. First of all, the void came into being, and out of the void came darkness and black night, and out of the night came light and day. Now, some of you might be thinking, wait a minute, that sounds kind of familiar. Of course it does! The reason it sounds familiar is because it sounds just like another creation myth, the Judeo-Christian creation myth. Now, I'm quoting the version from the Torah because it's theoretically older, I guess, depending on how you look at things, but you can also find this creation myth in any version of the Bible. Now, the Judeo-Christian origin story sounds very familiar to Hesiod's Theogony. The Torah states, "Now the earth was astonishingly empty, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the water. And God said,
'Let there be light.'
And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated between the light and between the darkness." Whoa. Look how many similarities there are between the two. Sweet, right? Remember what I said about archetypes? Across culture and across time. These two stories are separated by millennia and by thousands of kilometers. So Taoists believe in kind of this big chaotic thing. Everything was chaos, and there was kind of this cosmic egg. I don't know really how to picture that, but let's just go with it. And that inside this cosmic egg, yin and yang were vying to find balance, and that once they did, Pangu, the first human, was born. So once again, we see that there is an archetypal balancing and division of light and dark. Just like in Hesiod's Theogony, and in the Torah. Okay, let's move away from creation myths for a second, look at some other examples of myths from other countries. In Africa, there is an ancient tribe of people called the Yoruba. Now, the Yoruba have a myth about a god called Eshu. Now, Eshu is an African Orisha, and Orisha is basically a spirit manifestation of a god. The Yoruba myth about Eshu goes as follows. There was two good friends who were neighbors. Each of them worked as farmers in their respective fields. The Orisha Eshu comes walking along the line that divides their two fields. He's wearing a cap that is two different colors, one on each side. Each color is therefore only visible to one of the men. Later, the two men argue over the color of the cap. Eshu arrives and puts an end to the quarrel by showing both men his two-colored hat. Thus, each man is right, but not completely, and each man is wrong, but not completely. It's a matter of different, but not incorrect, perspectives of the same event and person. So here we have not a creation myth, but a very interesting myth that deals with the concept of duality. We have two neighbors and a hat with two colors. And in this we can see embedded deeply here the concept of right and wrong. One side of the hat or neighbor is not necessarily right or wrong, but we see that there's a duality of their perspectives. They're both right and they're also both wrong. Now, going back to Greek mythology, the Greeks didn't always demonstrate light and dark through two distinct individuals. Often they demonstrated the duality of light and dark in a single god. And this is starting to move into the direction that we really want to go to in our unit on duality. Let's look at the Greek myth of Persephone. And she is originally depicted as a young, beautiful child who is loved by her mother Demeter. Now, Demeter was the Greek goddess of harvest and grain and growth. One day, Persephone was in the fields with her mother and found a beautiful flower. She was so entranced by it that she did not hear the ground opening behind her. I don't really know how that's possible. And out of this fracture in the ground, Hades, king of the underworld, rose up with his horse and drawn chariot. He abducted Persephone and took her back to the underworld to be his queen. After this, Demeter realizes that her daughter is missing and goes on a search. As a result of this, Demeter is missing, and the world experiences its first season of winter as the crops wither and die because Demeter is missing and in mourning. Now, Demeter doesn't find her daughter right away, and as a result, she ends up as the queen of the underworld. And if you remember, at the beginning of the story, she was a beautiful child with a very light-filled family and concept. But now, being queen of the underworld and the daughter of Hades, she has this dark sort of hell thing going on. Now, here is the interesting part. In Greek mythology, she occupies both spaces. She is both core and Persephone at the same time. She's the goddess of grain and harvest and growth. She is also the queen of the underworld, grim and terrifying at the side of her husband Hades. And whenever you look at Persephone in art, she is depicted as both things at the same time. There is a balance of both light and darkness within the same character. Now, Persephone/Core is not the only Greek god or goddess that has this individual duality going on. The Greeks love to represent their gods and goddesses as at once good and evil, light and dark, as both fast and famine. Now, these aren't the only myths that have to do with good and evil. There are plenty of Hindu myths that have to do with good and evil. There's Norse myths that have to do with the concept of duality. But it is the story of Persephone that is truly the launching point for our next concept. That duality is not interesting or even necessarily true when it is divided into two separate characters, because we all find a duality within ourselves, just like Persephone. And this is where duality gets very, very interesting. Alright guys, today's homework and assignments are pretty short because the next video is going to have quite a bit. So, one of the assignments I have for you guys is not actually a writing assignment, it's just a pre-planning assignment. So, kind of just think about this more than anything. One of the assignments we're going to do in this unit is going to look at your own personal duality. It's going to look at how you are divided between good and evil and strong and weak and all of your other dualities and divisions. So, in keeping with that, in the back of your mind this week, start to think a little bit about, do you have any contradictory traits? Do you do things that sometimes you wonder why you're saying or doing? Maybe you consider yourself an honest person and you find yourself saying small lies to make yourself seem more important or more interesting than you actually are. As for the more major assignment, this week what I would like you guys to do is to try and find another myth that has the concept of duality embedded in it. This myth can be a nursery rhyme, or it can be a story that you were told when you were a kid, or you can go out and find some cool myths from some other cultures. Once you've found your myth and you've analyzed it a little bit, write a paragraph on how the theme of duality is present in your myth. So hopefully you could come up with something like 2 examples of duality in your myth, and then you could explain how the concept of duality is present in your examples in the myth. That's it for this week. Next week you'll have a lot more homework. Don't worry about it. I'm Señor Kozak. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.